Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. I am so glad that you are here. If you're brand new, my name is Barbara. I live in Tennessee in Zone 7B. And on this gardening channel, we talk about mostly gardening, but we talk about all things homesteading, DIY, cooking from scratch, and a lot of food preservation. Because once you grow the food, you got to preserve it if you're not going to eat it. So I'm so glad that you're here. And if you've been here before, thank you so much for stopping back by. Today is an exciting day, as it always is here on the homestead. But let me show you and give you a clue. Okay, and if you've been around, when I have this big old harvest tub, that means we're about to get serious. That means we're about to have a really big harvest. Today, y'all, we are harvesting our onions. We have been waiting and waiting and waiting, and today is the day. So on this video, I'm going to talk to you and show you me harvesting my onions. I'm going to tell you what kind, and I'm also going to share with you what do you do once you harvest your onions to store them, to keep them, and all the things. So I would love for you to stop by or stay by, and then definitely if you have not subscribed to my channel, go ahead and hit that subscribe link so we can be on this journey together. So let's talk about onions, y'all. So I love planting onions and harvesting onions. So let me kind of give you the backdrop of what we have planted before we harvest. So I planted these onions, the majority of them I planted on February the 28th that we're going to harvest today. And so onions have like a 90-day maturity. So they are ready to be harvested as of now. I bought all of my onion slips from Dixondale Farms. I have used them for the past 4 years and have always had great success. 100% great success. And so when it comes to onions, depending on where you are geographically, you're going to either use short day onions, intermediate onions, or long day onions. You can go on the Dixondale Farm site and it'll tell you based on where you live what type of onion you need to buy. I am right in that zone where we do an intermediate or long day onion, and that just means that onions have to have so much amount of daylight hours. I think it's 12 to 14 for intermediate. Don't quote me on that. Just go to the website and verify me. DixondaleFarms.com. But it has to have so much daylight in order to photosynthesize and bulb up and to be good sized onions. So you want to make sure that you're growing the right kind depending on where you are geographically. Okay, so I did 3 main kinds this year. I added a new kind, which was the Texas Sweet. This is my first time growing that. And then the other 2 that I've done for the last 4 years, which is the Candy, which is a yellow onion, and then also the red Candy, which is also just the same, but it's a red onion. So those are the kinds that I have grown. When it comes to harvesting onions, again, you want to wait until about 90 days, but also the onions will give you signs when it's time to start harvesting them. So let's go over here to the onions and let's take a look and see what they're looking like. Well, first off, there's a lot of weeds in here because, again, y'all know it's been raining a ton here. I was caught up on the weeds, and then the weeds just took over the last week of rain. But there's weeds in here. But basically, I don't know if you can see it to get in there, but I have some onions that are like just flopped over and laying down, and then you can see that there's some browning in there as well. So that's one of the beautiful things when it comes to nature. It'll let you know when it's time to be harvested. So the signs that the onions give you is that the leaves will turn brown, and then also they will flop over, meaning, hey, I'm done. I'm tired, sis, come get me, right? That means they are done with their bulbing process and they're not going to get any bigger. They're not going to do anything else. And then also just the days to maturity. So right around 90 days. So the 90-day mark for these onions was last week, but I did not get a chance to get to it just in between the rain and stuff like that. So this is the day that we're going to do it. And it actually rained this morning, like a hot minute. And then it rained again this afternoon, a hot minute. So it's like one of those 5-minute showers. But we're getting these onions today. And I know I did the same thing with my garlic, but they're going to dry out and cure and all of that. I'll talk to you about that once we actually get the onions harvested. But I think I've told you all the background information. I did it from slips. I told you where I got them from, and I told you the varieties that we're doing. Now, onions are heavy feeders, so you want to make sure that when you are planting your onions that you fertilize in the beginning, and that you also give it nitrogen, and then you give it something for a high level of phosphorus, which is responsible for root development. If you want more particulars, then I'll pop the video up here when I actually planted the onions in the spring. or excuse me, at the end of February, I'll pop that video up here and you can go back and take a look if you want to get all educated before you do your onions next spring. But let's go to the first bed. Oh, how many beds do I have? So I actually have I think I have 5 beds of onions. I have 2 out here. And then we also are gonna go out to the in-ground space where I have them in raised beds as well. So for 3 of the beds, I planted them February the 28th, and then 2 of the beds I did March 13th. So the March 13th, theirs should be due right around this week, but I think we're gonna go ahead and just pull them all now because I don't know that 2 or 3 days is gonna make a difference. We'll see when we get out there, because those 2 of the ones down there are the ones that I did later on. So we'll take a look once we get down there. But for now, let's turn the camera around and let's do this first bed. First one in, first one out. Let's get to it. Now, onions are, again, everything is satisfying to harvest, but onions, again, is one of those things that grow underground. So it doesn't take much to harvest it. If you watched my garlic video a week or so ago, it's just like the garlic. You're just gonna literally just wiggle it around and pull it up. Just like that. Shake off the excess dirt, and there is your onion. So this whole bed is the Texas Sweet. Again, it's the first time I've done this variety. And you can see the size on that. That's a medium size, I would say. Now, this particular variety, like I said, it's my first time doing it. And one of the things, if you've been watching me, you saw that these onions, particularly in this bed, started to flower early. I've never had onions flower before, and I don't know if it's because we had extreme temperatures, like one day it'd be 65 and the next day it'd be like 85. That could have definitely caused it. And so I was snipping off the flowers because when it starts to flower, that means it's signaling to the plant that we're done, like we're about to go back to seed, right? And I did not want them to be done because a month ago they were not ready. But I think it's interesting how this one is. I mean, it's a decent size, but it's not nearly as big as the onions that I've normally had. And again, I think the Texas super size is supposed to be super sweet. It's supposed to be big because I think it's referencing like the size of Texas. And we all know that Texas is like, I don't know, this big. But it's still, to me, this would be like an onion that you would find in the store. I'm certainly not complaining. I'm explaining. But let's get the rest of the bed and let's see if they're all this size or if we have some that's bigger or smaller. But I do think it's interesting that this one actually flowered, like mostly the entire bed. Now, the bed that we're going to do next beside it, I had 3 or 4 that were flowering, but not the rest of them. So that tells me that this variety definitely probably flowered sooner than later, which again, I've never had that happen. But let's go ahead. I'll just time lapse this part and pull out all these onions out of this bed, and then we'll come back and examine and see what this bed looked like. Okay, guys, so I have the first bed done. That whole bed, I cannot lift it up, it's too heavy, but that whole bed filled up this basket. So not sure I'm gonna be able to get any more in there. I may have to come up with an alternate plan and get me another basket. But I will say, this bed, these onions are small, much smaller than I have ever grown. So let me show you like maybe the average size. I wouldn't even say that's the average size. That's probably on the bigger side. Well, you can kind of see these. That's like the average size. So still not tiny, but just not as big as what I'm used to. I had a lot of them that looked like this size. So let me compare. So you can kind of see this is a different shade, but it's probably about the same mass area. So it's like a medium, I would say a medium size onion. So will it eat? Absolutely. Will I use it? Absolutely. Am I a bit disappointed? A little bit because I'm used to my onions being bigger now. I'm going to say it's 2 things. This is my opinion. One, I wonder if it's the variety, because not the variety itself, but the variety flowered. Why that one flowered and the rest of them didn't, I don't know, because we have the same weather beside the exact same bed. So I think that's one thing. And I'm wondering, is it the variety that flowered because the other ones didn't? But then I think the flowering itself definitely stunted the growth of these because it started flowering a month ago. So they're definitely on the smaller side. Number 2, I think some of them probably were too close together. So onions can be I usually do my onions 6 inches apart, which is, that's what I've always done. But I know, and I don't remember, I have to go back to the video, is sometimes near the end, if I have extra onions, I may just stick them in places just to kind of, if I only have like 3 or 4 left. So I wonder if some of that happened there, but I've done that before too. So yeah, will I grow this variety again? I don't know. Y'all need to convince me. If you've grown Texas Super Sweet and they like humongous, bigger than that on average, let me know down in the comments. Now, let's take a look at this other bed. These are candy onions. And so this is the ones that I've always grown before. So let's take a little test. So that's a pretty nice size. So let me compare it to, so this is the Texas Sweet right here, waving in the wind. This is the candy. So yes, the candy is bigger. Again, I know that that's just one, but let me pull a few more. I can tell you already with the first 3, they're much bigger than the Texas Super Sweet. Just on these 3 alone, bigger. So, what does that tell me? Stick with what you know. I don't know. I'm not, again, and I'm always encourage you to try new things because you don't know until you try. I may try it one more time, but I don't want to get a whole pack of Texas Super Sweet. I only want like a few. So maybe I can get somebody to give me some next spring, because I don't want to buy a whole pack because I don't want to do a whole bed. I just want to do a few to test my theory to see if they flower again early. What I know is that these, there was some flowering in here, but it was not the whole bed. I would say it was maybe 15% of the bed versus that bed. It was like pretty much 90%. So these are already bigger, these candy onions. But let me keep going, find some space, see what I'm gonna do. But let me get the rest of this, this bed right here harvested. Okay guys, we got this bed completely done. So I have some right there, and then this bucket is mounding over, and then I even have some that I put on the table. So we're gonna put these in the root cellar so that they can cure. So let me tell you about this bed and what it looked like. Okay, the onions in bed 2 were smaller than I'm accustomed to as well. I definitely had way more bigger ones. So if I had to like put a ratio on it, I would say that probably 50% were big, and then 50% were the other size that I showed you before, like a medium size. So much better than the first bed. But if you watch some of my videos from my onion harvest last year, I had majority all big. So again, that's just, I'm complaining. I'm just explaining to you the differences. The only thing I can come away with is that it flowered, and or maybe some of them were too close together. I did not see a rhyme or reason in terms of which ones were bigger versus smaller. I did notice that the ones on the perimeter of the bed seemed to be bigger than the ones on the inside. So that does tell me that maybe I had them a little bit too close together on the inside. So that's something that we can fix. We can just make sure that next year that we do them, you know, exactly the 6 to 8 inches apart. And if I have leftover, create another bed, give them away, and not try to stick them in there. Definitely. So again, I probably got more onions because I stuck them in there, but the onion size is smaller. But also I want to keep in mind that I did way more onions this year than I did last year. So we've just done 2 beds. I still have 3 more beds to go that's out there. As you can see, these beds are full of weeds. But let me talk to you about what I'm going to do from here before we go down there. So these onions are going to go in my root cellar. And so if you saw my garlic video, we're going to do the exact same thing that we did with the garlic. So these are storage onions, the candy variety. And I think I have to look up the Texas Super Sweet if it's a storage variety, but I know that the candy is because I've done that one before. So what that means is that you can store the onion. Now, If I wanted to eat the onion right now, today, could I do that? Absolutely, I could. I could just cut the stem off, take it in the house, wash it, cut it up, eat it. It's perfectly fine to eat right now. But I am going to cure them so that I can store them long term. So curing just means it's the same thing that you do with garlic. It's the same thing that you do with potatoes. You're going to put it in a cool, dark, dry place for 2 to 3 weeks and let it cure. That means what you see now that's green on the stem, that's going to turn brown. It's going to turn crinkly. It's going to like dry out, and all the moisture is going to go out of it. And the paper skin of the onion is going to toughen up. So that way it's not, what's the word? It's not going to be as soft, is the best way I can explain it. And so that way it will store longer. If I were to cut the top off the onion right now and try to store it, it's not going to store as long because, again, you want all that whole process to dry out. If I cut the top off right now and try to put it in my root cellar to store it, I may end up with some kind of rotting or things like that. Now, in terms of storage, they will last about 6 months. So it's June right now. I usually have onions that can be stored. I would say usually around November, I start to see them, growing sprouts or starting to go bad. So about 5 or 6 months is the sweet spot. And when I have onions left over at that particular juncture, what I do is that I just bring the onions in the house and then I just process them in my food processor, chop them up, put them in freezer size, gallon size freezer bags, and put them in my freezer so that I have chopped onions ready to go when I'm cooking. Also, what you can do, I have not done it before, but I plan on maybe doing it this year, is you can freeze dry the onions and make your own onion powder. So there's many different things that you can do with it. I have not successfully grown enough onions to last me a year yet. I did a few more onions. I didn't count while I was pulling them, but I think I planted, I don't know, somewhere around at least 400 onions, if I'm not mistaken. And last year, I think we planted 400, but because we did it, a lot of them out there, and they got choked out by weeds. I think we ended up harvesting maybe 250, something like that. So we'll see if these gets us to where we need to get to in terms of to last a year. It may not, and that's okay. What I do when I run out of onions, I just buy them from Azure Standard organically, and we just keep on rocking. But I can say that we will definitely have onions at least until January, for sure. January, February is usually like the sweet spot. So I'm glad about the onion harvest. We got 2 beds down, 3 beds to go, but right now we're going to get them into the root cellar and just lay them out on racks. And I'll tell you also this when we go down there about how we're going to store those onions that's down there, because we're not going to bring those up to the root cellar. And again, what I'm telling you is an ideal way to store them, but obviously if you don't have a root cellar, it don't have to be, it could be in your basement, it could be, outside is not ideal, but can you do it outside? People have done it before. So there's always an ideal, and there's always, something below the ideal that'll still work. So let's get these in the root cellar, and then we'll go harvest these last 3 beds. So we started walking things in there. So I took 1 batch, but then my husband just grabbed the big tote and brought that in there so that we could take a lot at one time. And then he just kept coming back out, getting the remaining ones that was on the table or in the bed. So while my husband was bringing them in, I was arranging them on a rack. So the same rack that I used to start seeds, I have one of those in my root cellar. We put the garlic on there last week when we did that. So the garlic is looking good. It's drying out. And the garlic was on the first 2 to 3 shelves. So I made space for the onions to go on the bottom 2 shelves, but we still had more onions. So then we had some pallets in the root cellar, and we laid the rest on pallets to dry and to cure. So we got them all in there finally. So now we're outside. This is in my outside garden. I have raised beds with onions in them. So I have 3 raised beds that's full of onions. This blue one here was planted at the same time as those back there, which was February the 28th. And then I have 2 more beds that was planted on March 13th. So 2 weeks later. And so we'll see how those are looking. I think we're just going to harvest all of them. We're going to start with the blue bed, which is red onions. I ended up having to bring my other cart because the one that you saw me wheel into the garden, it was a little bit, I feel like, too big to try to get in between the rows and stuff, and this one's a little bit smaller. So I'm gonna have to fill this one up and then take it and transfer it and then just keep doing that, because the other one I didn't want to like run over my plants and it was like too big to maneuver. So we're gonna go ahead and pull these red onions up and see what they're looking like. Okay, so this whole bed is red onions. I did not have any flowering. I'm putting on gloves because there were ants in this bed a couple weeks ago. I did not have any flowering on these. These are red candy. See, that is a very nice size onion. Yep, these are pretty nice size. Look at that. You can see that there. Okay, so let's go ahead, get this bed done and see what we're working with. Okay, y'all, that bed is harvested. Just needs to be weeded now. These are what I'm used to. These are considerably bigger than what we pulled in the back of the house. And this, like, look at this. Do you see that? How big that is? You can see it's the size of my hand, literally. Most of them, 90% of them are this size. The rest are just a little bit smaller, but overall, red onions did fabulous in this bed. Again, they didn't flower. Other than that, there's no difference than back there. The same weather that's here was back there, but you know, that's how it goes. Now, I'm gonna go ahead and pull these other two beds, even though they were planted 2 weeks later, because really they're gonna be due by the end, like in 3 or 4 days, and 3 or 4 days is not gonna make that much of a difference in terms of me wanting to come out here and do it. Let me just do it all now so I can be done with the onions. But this whole cart is full of red onions. I didn't count. I should have counted, but I didn't. The soil looks really good. They came out, again, really, really nice size. I'm very, very pleased. I'm gonna take this and dump it in the big cart, and then I'll come back and we'll pull these last two beds. Okay, so I got those transferred to the big cart. I just asked Google how many days are these at maturity. They're at 88 days, so they're only 2 days shy of the 90-day mark. You can see there's a lot of browning, and so 2 days is not gonna make that big of a difference. So we're gonna go ahead and harvest these. These are, I'm pretty sure, candy onions as well. I think these last two beds are candy onions, and there may be some more red ones in the last bed. But let's go ahead and get this bed, and again, let's do a little test. Let's see how the first two come up. Let me see if I still have a tag in here. See what we're working with. Okay, medium size. That's a good size for sure. Okay, very good. Yeah, some of these are smaller, but okay, first 5, not so bad, looking pretty good. So I'm gonna do this bed and the second bed. Okay, y'all, this is after the second bed, which is really the 4th bed overall. You can see the cart. It is full. I got space right here for the last bed, but we are full. Full of onions. Okay, y'all, the onions are done. Every bed harvested, all 5 beds of onions. These last 2 beds are very similar to what we did in the back. I would say more like probably 50% of them are a bigger size, and the other 50%, no, I would say 50% are a big size, 30% probably medium size, and then 20% on the small side. So again, the red candy onions are the star of the show on this particular harvest for 2025. Again, I don't know what happened. Again, I just have guesses. And again, these did not flower at all, so I can't blame it on them flowering. I think that some of them were too close together, but even some of the red ones were too close together and they still was like swole. So I don't know. Sometimes you can't figure it out. And again, this is the first time my onions have been this small on average as a whole. But it is what it is, and I'm still thankful. I'm still grateful because it's onions that I don't have to buy. I definitely have more onions than I did last year. I think last year I probably had 250, and I think this year I probably have about 400. I didn't do an exact count, but I know how many I planted, and everything I planted came up, with the exception, I think, of 2 that kind of broke in the ground. I could probably go in and dig out. It'll probably be a little bitty onion, but everything else was had bulbed. So I'm glad the onion harvest is over, y'all. I'm tired. I was going to do more stuff, but not today. Not today. This took much longer than I anticipated just because I had to pull them up, transfer them, and then get them. Now, these are going to stay right here in this cart. It is not ideal, but trying to take all of these onions up to my house, behind my house to the root cellar, is a feat more than what I'm willing to do. And last year, I kept them in the cart and kept them in the greenhouse, and they turned out just fine. They cured because, of course, it gets hot in there. And again, because of the shade cloth, you know, I probably wouldn't put them in direct sun. So even though it's hot in there and not necessarily cool, it worked last year. Now, I'm not telling you to do that because that's not ideal, but I'm just telling you that's what I'm going to do because I did it last year. And because of y'all, I'm just out of space. The only other thing I could do is to lay them on this table here, but they would be outside, obviously, in the elements. I could do that. And they're on top of each other, which is not ideal. You kind of want some airflow, but I may take some of them off and lay them out on the table. I don't know. But either way, they're going to cure the same way. They're going to be somewhere for 2 weeks, getting some airflow in a dry place. And in 2 weeks, I'll be able to snip off the tops and be able to store them long term. So I'm thankful and grateful for my onion harvest. That part of the onion harvest is done, good to go. We planted in the spring and now we're harvesting at the beginning of the summer. And that also means I have, let's see, 5 beds that I can fill. And so we'll do that on some subsequent videos. I'll show you what we're going to do out here in these beds in the outside, and then what we're going to do in the beds behind my house. So definitely you want to subscribe so that you can see more of the journey. Listen, y'all, thank you so much for joining me today. Let me know if you did onions and what variety that you did and if you've had success. Maybe there's one that I want to try for next year. And let me know if you guys have done the Texas super sweet, super size and had great success. Because I don't know if I'm going to do it again. Y'all tell me if I need to do it again and give it another try. But remember, y'all, this is all a journey. Let's grow together. I'll see you next time, friend.